So Brandon Mitchell, a Chauvin juror, wore this George Floyd police brutality themed t-shirt twice. But get this. He claims he doesn't remember ever putting it on. He doesn't remember wearing it. He just, I don't know, maybe it walked out of his closet and climbed onto his shoulders and dressed him for himself. Who knows? How do you not remember this? You're going to a rally themed after police brutality and George Floyd. You wear a t-shirt that says, "Get your knee off our necks," and then you rewear it months later. I believe it was May to October. May 2020 was the rally. And then October 2020 was when his YouTube video of his podcast was published. You don't remember that you own this t-shirt? I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I do not buy that. So here's the other thing. The question is, did this juror lie to the judge? Because it's important to know whether he did. He claimed that he had heard very little about George Floyd's case in general, which seems implausible given how much publicity has surrounded this in our country as a whole this past year. Brandon Mitchell said no when he was asked if he had participated in demonstrations against police brutality in Minneapolis or anywhere else since Floyd's death. He said no. No, he had not participated in demonstrations against police brutality in Minneapolis or anywhere else. But when he was in Washington, D.C., he was standing next to a man. You can see it in the picture. He was standing next to a man that had a sign about police brutality, police reform, and George Floyd. Floyd's family spoke at that rally. The purpose was to build support for the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Obviously, this guy is not telling the truth, right? Brandon Mitchell misled the judge. At the very least, that's a kind way of saying it looks like he lied, which means that he wasn't unbiased. So if he's not an unbiased juror, then the jury itself was biased, which means that Derek Chauvin, whether you think he's guilty or whether you think he's not guilty, he was deprived of his constitutional right to a fair trial. Okay, so the verdict absolutely should be overturned based just on that. Plus, the evidence doesn't meet the standard of what he was charged with. Let's walk through that. So Derek Chauvin faced 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. Okay, second-degree murder is what's known as felony murder. It's murder that is committed during the commission of another felony. Right, in this case, the accusation was Derek Chauvin was committing assault against George Floyd, and George Floyd died during the commission of the assault, the felony assault, okay? But here's my question. How can the chokehold be assault when it's a legally permissible hold, meaning the police department sanctioned it? Now, you can argue whether or not the police department should sanction holds like this. That's an argument that can be had, sure. But the fact of the matter is, at the time, it was a permissible hold. So how can it be assault when it's a legally permissible hold? Okay, so for second-degree murder, you have to have the intent to harm someone. How can you intend to harm someone when you're using a legally permissible hold? How can it be a felony when it's a legally permissible hold? I don't think it can be. Therefore, I don't think that the second-degree murder charge is valid. Okay, so the next charge, third-degree murder. Third-degree murder is known as depraved indifference homicide, right? This statute simply doesn't apply to facts like this case. The judge should have thrown it out from the beginning, because depraved indifference homicide essentially means, and this is the classic example, right? Some nut job who fires a gun indiscriminately into a crowd of people. He, I guess, knows that he will kill people, but he's not targeting individuals in and of themselves. And it applies to multiple people, as in a wanton disregard for a mass of lives, right? So this doesn't even meet the standards of what that would look like, because Derek Chauvin was in a one-on-one interaction with George Floyd, right? So it wasn't any wanton disregard for multiple people's lives. And the multiple people part is critical, because in the state statute reads with a multiple, it's plural. You have to have multiple people, okay? So the third-degree murder charge shouldn't have even been allowed to be tried. It doesn't even apply to the facts of the case. At most, Derek Chauvin should have been charged with manslaughter, perhaps convicted of manslaughter, because, and this is the kicker in the case for me, because he kept kneeling on George Floyd's neck or back or shoulder and refusing medical care even after Floyd had passed out. That's the argument in favor of manslaughter that could be made, right? The standard for manslaughter is culpable negligence. There's no criminal intent that's necessary. Culpable negligence means that there's gross negligence coupled with an element of recklessness. So, for example, George Floyd was in the custody of Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin had a responsibility to give medical care to him if he needed it, and he did need it when he passed out while in the chokehold by Derek Chauvin. Okay? So at the very, very worst, manslaughter, should have been the only valid charge. The other two, third-degree murder simply wasn't valid, and second-degree murder, it didn't meet the elements of the statute, right? So all in all, this trial, the trial of Derek Chauvin, wasn't fair.